What you're seeing is a collection of some of my favorite video game worlds. But what makes these locations so great? My most beloved Nintendo titles are the ones whose worlds have a feeling to them. A feeling you remember for years, even if you don't expect it at first. Ocarina of Time is my favorite Zelda game, but it took years for me to realize that. Only in hindsight did its world really start to resonate with me. Even though years had passed, I could easily recall its memorable layout and vast locations. Welcome to CC Media, where it's all about Nintendo, and today I want to talk about some of my most memorable worlds from Nintendo games, whether that be a level, a town, or even a world map that left a lasting impression. So be sure to subscribe to CC Media for all sorts of unique and fun Nintendo-related content. Thanks guys, and let's get started. Super Mario Galaxy is arguably the most atmospheric Mario experience you can have. The game utilizes music and shading and camera movement to create such an ultra-cinematic experience. Locations like Honey Hive Galaxy, Space Junk Galaxy, and Ghostly Galaxy each capture their own unique feeling. Though whereas Sunshine's hub world feels bustling and jam-packed, Galaxy's feels quite open and quiet. There's always something so calming about returning to Rosalina's observatory after your adventures. Starship Mario from Galaxy 2 brought back more of that hustle and bustle from Delfino Plaza, with more NPCs and activities, but it stripped away the expansiveness of the original. Call me crazy, but I prefer a larger, more open hub world rather than one that's smaller and has more going on, because those expansive environments feel more like real, authentic places. The Comet Observatory, Peach's Castle, and Delfino Plaza feel genuine and deliberate, and those are the hub worlds that resonate with me for years. On the topic of Galaxy 2, that game did have its fair share of memorable worlds. Tall Trunk Galaxy, for example, has this super fun mission where you slide down a tree trunk, and plus it introduces these cute little wooden characters who I remember so distinctly, even though they don't appear much else in the game. Wild Glide Galaxy strikes me in a similar way. I have such a vivid memory of flying through the level as this bird, and perhaps that's because at the time I was quite challenged by this mission, but the level on its own just has such a wonderful vibe to it. For as much flack as Mario Sunshine receives, I loved the game growing up. Its world always stood out as distinct to me. Peanut Park, for example, is this energetic and vibrant theme park, and Serena Beach Hotel is spooky and dense and intriguing. Many argue that the tropical setting held the game back, but I think the creative constraints really allowed Nintendo to get, well, creative. Before we move on from 3D Mario, I have to give a mention to one location that's always stuck out to me from a generally less memorable game, and that is Bowser's World from Super Mario 3D World. And I'm not talking about a specific level either, I'm just talking about the world map itself. You see, 3D World consists mostly of the usual Mario templates, at least when it comes to its world map. You've got the snow world, the desert world, and so on and so forth. But as soon as you enter that pipe and the music goes quiet, you can tell something is different. And sure enough, you're met with this dazzling, colorful, yet ominous theme park created by Bowser himself. It is quite the sight, and that image has always stood out to me from that game. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild changed the game when it comes to the open world genre. The entire world feels so alive and genuine, and a few locations stand out in particular. Stepping into Hyrule Castle for the first time is one of the most unnerving experiences I can remember having with a game. Something about the castle gives the impression that it's a character of its own, always watching your every move, even when you're alone in its dark and twisted caverns. I've beat this game a number of times, and I still can't get over the adrenaline of visiting this place. Two other locations that always stood out to me in Breath of the Wild were Zora's Domain and Rito Village, the former due to its sheer beauty and the latter due to its breathtaking height. Unfortunately, both the Goron City and Gerudo Town didn't have quite as lasting of an impression on me. Their designs kinda just felt flatter and less inspired. Another location that stands out to me in Breath of the Wild happens to be one of the first locations you visit in the game. That is, of course, the Temple of Time. Regardless of what Zelda title I'm playing, every time I step into this temple, I feel a sense of sacredness. Certain locations in the Zelda series are brought back all the time, but the Temple of Time has always had this peaceful and solemn presence, regardless of whether it's fully built or barely standing. It carries such a history within the Zelda series, even predating the events of Ocarina. I never find myself thinking, oh, I'm in this game's version of the Temple of Time. Instead, I think, oh, I'm in the Temple of Time. And that's just so cool. To continue talking about the most memorable places in Zelda games would take hours, as the series is full of standout locations, especially its dungeons. Just to name a few, however, here are some of the most memorable Zelda dungeons to me. The Forest Temple and Shadow Temple from Ocarina of Time. The Moon from Majora's Mask. The Forbidden Woods and Forsaken Fortress from The Wind Waker. Snow Peak Ruins and the Palace of Twilight from Twilight Princess. and the ancient cistern and sand ship from Skyward Sword. Those are the ones that really stuck with me for a long time. Their music, their designs, and just everything put together to form an experience that resonates with you and sticks with you. In addition to everything I've discussed in this video, there are a handful of other memorable worlds from Nintendo games that I do want to bring up before we wrap things up. The first is Luigi's Mansion, which to me is the most unlikely gem of a game that I have ever played. To be quite honest, it took years for younger me to play Luigi's Mansion, mostly because I was just too scared to play it for the longest time. Now that says something about the atmosphere of that game. And it isn't just because of one thing in particular, like one scary part or one spooky looking ghost. It's the entire game as a whole having such an eerie feel to it, and it just leaves such a powerful impression on you. Of course, you cannot talk about the atmosphere of Nintendo games without mentioning Metroid. Whether it's a 2D game like Super Metroid or a 3D one like, of course, the Prime games, the atmosphere here always feels front and center. Everything in these games is designed with the feeling of isolation and exploration in mind. Not just the music and the world layout either, but even just the progression of events around which these games are built. Take the first Prime, for example, which starts you off with all of Samus's tools, only to strip them away after the first mission and isolate you on a completely new planet. Having experienced what it's like with all of Samus's abilities makes it all the more impactful when they're taken away, adding to that unfamiliar feeling of isolation. So given as Metroid games are designed with such an emphasis on atmosphere, it really makes the worlds of those games stick with you for a long time. And while I may not have as much experience with the Metroid franchise as I do with, say, Zelda or Mario, I can definitely see how the atmosphere of the Metroid games is arguably even more apparent in Metroid than in really any other Nintendo franchise. There are so many memorable video game worlds out there, even things I haven't even touched on, like Mario Kart tracks or Mario Party boards. Heck, Paper Mario is full of them. Or I haven't even mentioned the Donkey Kong Country games, where the entire environments feel like part of the nature of the world. Nothing feels static, there are no floating platforms there just for the reason of being there to jump on. Everything feels like it's part of the world and is there for a reason. This has been my discussion on some of the most memorable Nintendo locations, as well as just the importance of unique and atmospheric worlds in games. If you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, be sure to subscribe to CC Media for all sorts of unique and fun Nintendo-related content, and if you've got any memorable video game worlds that you'd like to share, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.